this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Spring into deals for seasonal savings. Shop select 1-pint annuals for just $1. Plus, get a free additional Cobalt 40-volt 2-amp-hour battery when you buy a select Cobalt 40-volt trimmer and blower combo kit. Our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 5/6. Annuals offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii.
Visit your nearby Lowe's on East 17th Avenue in Hutchinson.
Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
Do you want to find a stress-free way to buy your next car? Start at CarMax and shop your way. And if you want to browse with confidence, get pre-qualified online with no impact on your credit score and shop cars within your budget. From luxury cars to family rides, CarMax has options for almost every price range, including more than 25,000 cars priced under $25,000. So, hey, want to get started? Just head to CarMax.com for details and get pre-qualified today. Want to drive? CarMax.
This is Jana Kramer from Wind Down with Jana Kramer. Instead of giving your mom something that fades, give her something that becomes part of her home this Mother's Day. The Lennox Spice Village is a set of 24 hand-painted little houses that are actually spice jars, perfect for anyone who loves to cook, entertain, or enjoy the little details that make everyday life special. As a mom, I love gifts that help turn ordinary moments into memories. Charming, timeless, and meant to be used, this is one of those pieces she'll treasure. And once you see it, you'll want it for your own home too. Find the full collection at lennox.com/spicevillage.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. Being from Louisiana, there's been, in the last 2 decades, there's been kind of a shift in South Louisiana, and specifically the New Orleans metro area. That shift has been prompted by many things. I think Katrina being number one, and also the opportunities that might exist outside of Orleans Parish and, of course, the city of New Orleans. That is free from crime, opportunities financially. And what I mean by that is that people in New Orleans have migrated to a location that still, while within the boundaries of the state of Louisiana, is not in Orleans Parish any longer. They've gone to what's referred to as the North Shore. And what that means is that huge body of water, Lake Pontchartrain, that separates New Orleans or Orleans Parish and Jefferson Parish from their neighbors to the north, stands between them. With that said, many people have migrated to the North Shore of Lake Pontchartrain, but yet they've brought New Orleans sensibilities, their unique accent, which if you've ever heard a New Orleans accent, it's different than anything else in the South. But going back years and years, it used to be said by New Orleans natives that if in fact you went to the North Shore, you were going to the country. Well, let's take a trip back to 1982 in what would be referred to as the country back then, to a place called Covington, Louisiana, where arguably one of the most brutal cold cases in that parish's history, St. Tammany, has remained unsolved until today. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, back in 1982, I can tell you by the standards of those times back then, the case that we're going to talk about today has such a level of brutality that I would imagine that it is a specter that has hung over that community for a long, long time. It's something that is kind of woven into the psychic DNA of that world. And maybe we have finally got some answers that have long been sought after.
Roxanne Sharp was 16 years old, Joe. 16 years old. And by the way, she was, as we would say, diminutive. She was very small at 5'1". But interestingly enough, she was known to police. And I want to get this right, okay? Because we're very careful about how we present cases and victims and things like that. And it's important to note first, this was 1982. It was a different world in 82 than it is now. Much different. But in this area, and I'm going to have to really rely on your ability to explain the area, the physical area around the fairgrounds in this area of Covington that we're talking about, to help us all understand what took place, where it took place, and probably when as well. But just to give you an idea, guys, she's 16 years old. She has an 18-month-old son. And law enforcement says she did not have a strong family background. They described her as poor. When she wanted to go somewhere, she hitchhiked most of the time. But again, going back to that day and time, Joe, was that a common occurrence in this area of Louisiana? And anyway, that's where this all begins, because at 16 years old, February 1982, Roxanne Sharp was raped and murdered, with her body left like trash. She was discovered days after she went missing. The time she was last seen was around February 9th. Her body wasn't discovered until February 12th. And it was discovered, you know how you've taught me to look at the finders, Joe, of who found her body. Well, the finders were people that were there as Dixie Trail riders, and they found her body by pure happenstance. It was cold, overnight lows around 15 degrees. And these Dixie Trail riders were looking for firewood to stay warm that evening when they found her body. And that's where that case begins, in the woods near the fairgrounds in Covington, Louisiana, February of 1982.
Cold is not generally something you associate with South Louisiana, but trust me, for those that are not familiar, it does get quite cold, particularly up on the North Shore. But that's particularly cold if you're talking about a 15-degree range at that point in time. And it's not like you could, back then, it's not like you could pop over to the local convenience store. You know how they sell bundles of firewood? That wasn't a thing back then. No. Now, there might be a little old guy down the road that'll that'll sell you a cord of wood, out in the country. But yeah, you would have to go about trying to find something to stay warm for the night. And I'm thinking about this riding club and the Dixie Trail Riders, and I'm thinking, for a civilian, Dave, can you imagine, and we're going to give you a peek inside of this in just a second, can you imagine being somebody that, listen, you just want to be out, maybe enjoying a ride, you're with your friends, and you've thought about this, you thought about the excitement of doing, you've probably been planning it, this trail ride for a while, and then all of a sudden, this is interjected into your field of view. And it's something that you cannot possibly escape. This goes to a bigger point, right? Because the reason we're talking about this case is the fact that a fellow by the name of Charles Dowdy, who is with a local radio station, 94.7. He got brought into the case by a Louisiana state police officer who had wanted to be, he's a resident of this area originally, had always wanted to be a cop. And this thing, he was probably a very young kid when this case went down, but it had always, kind of stuck like a splinter in his brain all these years. And he wanted to get this thing solved. And over this period of time, a long, long time, he probably felt like that if he could get the word out, about this case, this is something that would be solvable. And Dave, I'll let you go ahead and tell folks, but there was there's a podcast that actually popped up as a result of this young woman's case.
Well, you mentioned Charles Dowdy of Lake 94.7 in the area there, but when we were talking about this and how it was resolved, law enforcement was doing the job the best they could. But you know how many times we're covering a story and we will have a number. If you have anything, any tips, anything you remember, any thoughts you have, please let us know. That is a very serious request. Law enforcement gets so much information from an anonymous tip. And especially when you deal with a cold case like this, where a lot of people tend to stay in the area, people talk. And so what happened is the guy, Stephan Ferguson, who grew up in the area, became a Covington police officer in 1997. And it was a friend of his in 1997 who actually said, hey, now that you're on the police force, if you get the chance, can you look up one of my relatives that she was murdered? Yeah, she was murdered in 82. This is 15 years later at that time. And she goes, we don't know what happened yet. It's never been solved. If you get a chance, would you mind giving it a look? And so it was that personal request from a relative of Roxanne Sharp that led to Stephan Ferguson following this case. Now, he spent a good career right there in Covington. In 2020, he became a state police officer, an investigator with the Louisiana State Police. And again, the case stayed with him. This is the happenstance that comes about in solving a case, Joe. It was the personal appeal from a relative that stayed with him all these years of his career. He's now at the state police and they're moving offices around. They're moving all their investigators into a different room. And as they're moving all these old cases, he sees the name Roxanne Sharp. He pulls the folder and he goes, you know what? Let's take a look. This is like in 2020, 2021, somewhere in there. And he's pulling it out and they're like, okay, the first thing you do, you go back and you look at the evidence that was, that they had at the time, what happened to it, where it went, what tests were done, and the old interviews. And you go back and you reread the notes that were taken. And that's what they did. They just went old school police work. And after a couple of years of doing this, Joe, they were able to create a somewhat better story of what they think happened. Right. But they hit a wall. Yeah. A hard wall.
Which you do. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And that's where they reached out. They're like, you know what? If we could do a podcast about Roxanne Sharp. This is a 16-year-old teenage girl with an 18-month-old son who was brutally raped and murdered in this town. It was, and by the way, to give you an idea of the type of violence that occurred in this area of Louisiana, Roxanne's murder was the first murder in 2 years. Okay, they don't have murders that often back then.
No, they don't.
And so as this Stephan Ferguson was digging into it, they reached out to a local broadcaster about possibly doing a podcast to help get information. And it was really geared for, let's update everybody on this unsolved murder that took place in our hometown and see if anybody remembers anything. And you know what they did, Joe? This and kudos to this broadcaster. He jumped in with both feet. And I will tell you, in this day and age, men and women working in radio, everybody wears multiple hats because a radio station will have 2 or 3 employees that take care of a 24/7 operation. And Charles Dowdy created the time to do it, and he did a great job. I went back over his notes, Joe. This guy went to the public library and found old newspapers from the date and time this happened because, hey, what was reported? And you know what? Some of the most important information that we have came from those initial reports.
Isn't that something, and you think about, that's why, when I teach or taught young investigators, you're always taught that you have to retain all of your notes, everything that you do, and even contained in your own notes. There are actually newspaper clippings from the Times. I've seen old notes like this. Folks might not realize as well. Did you know that if you go to court on a case, they're not just going to subpoena your official report? Did you know that all of your notes as an investigator are subject to be subpoenaed? You have to hang on to all of your old notebooks. And it can be a nightmare. People don't think about that, but the defense wants to be able to see whatever your spontaneous renderings were when you first observed things. And as you know, if you write something, many times you'll go back and clean it up. But that's, as an investigator, you have to have that. And they've held on to all of this, lo these many years. And when you can come back to the modern times and kind of frame it up, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? But so people understand this I call him a young man, but the Louisiana State Patrol, investigator that was involved in this. If you want a point of reference for what organization this individual represents, and I know that among our friends, we're going to have fans of this program. If you have ever seen the first season of True Detective with McConaughey and Harrelson, which will knock your socks off if you haven't seen it, they were, in fact, investigators for the Louisiana State Police. And that is actually what they represented. However, in this particular case, as horrific as that program was and what it was depicting, it's still fiction. In the case of Roxanne, this is reality.
Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
This is Jana Kramer from Wind Down with Jana Kramer. Instead of giving your mom something that fades, give her something that becomes part of her home this Mother's Day. The Lennox Spice Village is a set of 24 hand-painted little houses that are actually spice jars, perfect for anyone who loves to cook, entertain, or enjoy the little details that make everyday life special. As a mom, I love gifts that help turn ordinary moments into memories. Charming, timeless, and meant to be used, this is one of those pieces she'll treasure. And once you see it, you'll want it for your own home too. Find the full collection at lennox.com/spicevillage.
Your social media feed delivers plenty of advice, but it doesn't know you. It doesn't ask questions. It doesn't give physical exams or order tests. Doctors do. At the American Medical Association, we believe the best care starts with a real conversation with someone who understands the science and your unique health. So stay curious, ask questions, but when it's time to make decisions, make them with a doctor. Learn more at amahealthversushype.org. That's amahealthvshype.org.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Dave, keep in mind, this is way before the times of GIS. We didn't have global positioning. We didn't have drones that could fly over and do LiDAR and all those sorts of things that they do now. Back then, this was very analog. And what you would do is, if you've ever come across a motor vehicle accident, okay, and you've ever seen a guy out on the road, it'll generally be like a trooper that'll be out there. And we have these measuring wheels, okay? So it's got a handle on it. It's a single handle, and it's got a big wheel, right? And there's a counter on the side of the wheel. So let's say that we have a victim, like Roxanne. We've got the top of her head, okay? We would start with that wheel at the top of her head and roll to a fixed object. Now, this is going to take you over some treacherous terrain because you don't know what exists between you and that fixed point. Well, the fixed point, say, for instance, is the intersection of a road. And it's not just the intersection. You want to go to, say, if you've got a curb there, you would go to the center of that curb and walk all the way to that point. And it could be 200 feet. All right. Then you find another fixed position. It might be, I don't know, the corner of a house or a structure, which structures are difficult because structures can be torn down. And you would walk from that to the sole of her right foot, and so forth and so on. And so triangulation, meaning 3, we would go and we would try to position that body, because this is the one thing that you know as an investigator, and we know as people, I think in a general manner, landscapes change. You think back to your childhood home or maybe a place that you used to go as a kid. Those places might not exist anymore. Well, the same thing happens with homicide investigation. You might not, in fact, have the structure that previously existed. People many times are notorious for using utility poles. Well, guess what can happen to utility poles? Our house back in 2018 was destroyed by a tornado, mine and Kimmy's. Well, the utility poles all had to be replaced up and down our street. It was a twisted mess. Well, those utility poles are not set in the same spot that they were set previously. And you know how I talked about 1 degree being off? If you move that, then you skew the whole thing. But what they did in Roxanne's case is the fact that they were able to go out to the fairgrounds. You can't merely say, well, it's at the fairgrounds. You have to go back to a specific location at the fairgrounds. And if you're trying to reconjure this in your brain, which you are as an investigator trying to breathe life into a cold case, right? You want to be able to go out as an investigator and reset where they were back at that time. And that's why whatever you do right now in the present is going to echo into the future. So those individuals that were out there working this scene all the way back in 1982, they had to be spot on with what they were doing. And it sounds like they were, because Dave, didn't you tell me that they took those coordinates and actually brought out drones to remap this area?
As this investigation, when they were building the podcast, Charles Dowdy, the host of the podcast, went out there with Stephan Ferguson, the Louisiana State Police investigator, and using the markers, they actually used the original police file. And just to give you an idea, 2 roads intersecting near the fairgrounds are McGee and Florida. Roxanne's body was found in a wooded area about 119 feet from McGee and 138 from North Florida. And the markers, they use on those roads to give you an idea of how the roads intersect and where her body was relative to that. They were able to get so close to this from where her body was in relation to the road and to where the woods are in relation to the road as well, because you're two big roads here that are intersecting. That does not seem like a place where you're going to be able to conduct a rape murder and feel like you're in privacy. And they pointed out that they, being the investigators and Charles Dowdy, when they were talking about this area, it got very wooded very quickly. Yeah. So much so that even back in 82, it hadn't changed that dramatically. In times, a lot of our areas are like that in rural communities. Yeah. And in this particular case, Joe, it hadn't changed much since 1982 to 2025 and 26. But they actually were able to pinpoint the location of clothing. When Roxanne's body was found, Joe, she was found nude, and a jacket had been placed over her torso. The rest of her body, her clothing, was almost like a trail from the road to the wood line, and then through the woods there was a trail that you could follow with the clothing that was taken off of Roxanne. And I want to add something to this, because when we were looking at the crime scene, when this, I say we, I'm a broadcaster first and foremost. That's where my life has been spent, in broadcasting, radio and television. And when Charles Dowdy, the broadcaster, was talking to police about the crime scene, he was trying to paint a picture for his audience. That's what you do. And as they got talking about the crime scene, talking about the clothing and where it was found, and then going out to the scene and marking it, they talked about the actual body. Yeah. And officers, Ferguson in particular, said, "We're not going to show those to you." This murder, this rape and murder of this 16-year-old mother of an 18-month-old son was so animalistically horrible, Joe, that they said, you're not going to be able to unsee these photos. They will stay with you the rest of your life. And I can't do that. Ferguson's telling him, I can't do that to you. We won't do that to you. So that's how bad this was. But when, and by the way, Ferguson, the investigator, talked about the finders and how what the finders, they're just civilians looking for wood to stay warm that night. And they come across this diminutive little girl, 5'1", Joe. She's a very small girl. And to get to the nitty gritty of this, her clothing was stripped off and left like a trail to her body. They were able to use this triangulation to pinpoint it. And that actually helps when they were able to, all these years later, decades later, fly a drone to get an overhead view of where everything was. Because when you're on the ground, it's kind of like the Nazca lines. You don't see anything. No, you don't. You don't. Once you have the markers for where these items were found, and you go overhead, all of a sudden you're going, there's a trail from this part of the road all the way in.
Precisely. And that can go to things like positionality of vehicle that may have, you think road, you've got people walking up and down roads, but let's just say that a conveyance is used, like a vehicle, a car, where you're transporting her out for this heart. Well, here's a good spot. You've got perpetrators here that are going to say, let's take her over here. And all the while, I love the fact that you use the word animalistic when you're tearing off these bits of clothing. And then when you take this bird's eye view, you can actually track it. Dave, did you know each one of those items that you were just mentioning, each one of those items would have been triangulated too. So if you put this up on a grid and you begin to see all of these clothing items as evidence, you're going to have very exacting measurements, particularly in today's world that we're in, with the observations that you can make and how you can literally breathe life into this. Whenever this makes it before a courtroom, okay, that image, that modern image, is going to be posted in the courtroom during the trial. Juxtaposition with all of those crime scene photographs where history, as horrible as it was, where time was stopped back in 1982 and they were processing that scene. That's what I mean by how you can take something and breathe life into a cold case. You literally resurrect it and you make it current. You make it vital. you emphasize how horrible this was. And people forget the horror really, really quickly. I think many people do. Cases come up in the news and we forget about what was actually experienced back then. But I can tell you this, in Roxanne's case, they're going to relive this. They're going to see this. And whoever is responsible for this is going to be made to watch and see. And they will remember what they did to this child.
Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
This is Jana Kramer from Wind Down with Jana Kramer. Every Mother's Day, I tell myself I'm going to be more thoughtful than flowers because flowers are beautiful, but they don't last. In my house, everyone always ends up in the kitchen, friends, family, the kids, and I love having things around that spark conversation and feel special. That's why I love the Lennox Spice Village, and your mom will too. It's a set of 24 hand-painted little houses that are actually spice jars, and I swear people notice it the second they walk in. It's charming, it's nostalgic, and it somehow makes even everyday cooking feel a little more fun. And here's the best part. It actually gets used every day. Whether you're starting the full set or helping her complete one she's loved for years, there's a whole world of Spice Village to explore. This Mother's Day, give her something she'll treasure long after the card is put away. Trust me, once you see it, you'll want one too. Find the full collection at lennox.com/spicevillage.
Your social media feed delivers plenty of advice, but it doesn't know you. It doesn't ask questions. It doesn't give physical exams or order tests. Doctors do. At the American Medical Association, we believe the best care starts with a real conversation with someone who understands the science and your unique health. So stay curious, ask questions, but when it's time to make decisions, make them with a doctor. Learn more at amahealthversushype.org. That's amahealthvshype.org.
The next 30 seconds could save you hundreds on your car insurance. At The Hartford, we're passionate about your protection. If you're 50 or over, AARP Auto Insurance from The Hartford gives you benefits that really matter. And you could save $597 when you switch. How's that for a little peace of mind? Visit trusthartford.com today. The Hartford, your protection is our passion. The Hartford Insurance Group, Inc. pays royalty fees to AARP for the use of its intellectual property. AARP and its affiliates are not insurers. Savings vary.
Dave, we do not have an autopsy report in front of us, but I think that it's very important that understanding what Roxanne went through gives you an idea of how savage her homicide was. Give me that anatomical landmark that you gave me previously about where they say she was impacted by something. What was that again?
All right. In going back to an article, newspaper article in 1982, February 18th, the chief of police at the time gave some very specific things because they didn't have any suspects. A week after finding her body, Joe, in this small area, they still didn't have any suspects. And the chief of police was trying to get some information to the public to try to find answers. Chief of police said that Roxanne had been dead 48 to 72 hours when her body was found. They still don't exactly know when she was killed, but she had been dead 48 to 72 hours. The chief of police said she was hit above the bridge of her nose with, quote, some sort of object, unquote. And the chief of police mentions the coroner's report saying asphyxiation was a contributing cause of the death. But back to this, what does the police chief actually say, Joe? What does he mean saying she was hit above the bridge of her nose with some sort of object?
Yeah, so they have something that they recognized at that point in time. Well, first off, you can eliminate hand. You can probably eliminate foot. You can probably eliminate knee. And what I mean by that is blunt force trauma that is generated by a punch, a stomp, a knee shot to the face. They have something there in this kind of broad term where you're talking about an object, and there would be probably margins that are going to tie back to something. All right. So when you say object, okay, let's just say if it was a hammer. All right. There are certain things that we look for with hammer attacks and hammer marks. But when you have something that's non-specific, like a rock, for instance, you don't have these definitive margins on it where you can say, or a pattern where you can say, okay, this is what the head of a hammer looks like, or this is, this is what a block of wood looks like because you have specific angles, or even a pickaxe. I've seen pickaxes, that have been used with blunt force penetrating trauma. It is maybe non-specific at that point in time, but what we do know is that they're saying that asphyxia is a contributing factor. So if asphyxia is a contributing factor, that would make the blow potentially the primary thing that we're looking at, with asphyxia being part of it. What can we deduce from this? Well, if we're looking at a sexual attack and she is on the ground, okay, and she's face up. I hate to use that term because she's in a supine position, we'll put it that way. And so her eyes are toward the heavens. Was this after the sexual attack is completed? Was this something that they used as some type of object to strike her with to kill her? And you can think of any number of things, a heavy item perhaps. And when that didn't succeed, because remember, if you're struck in the forehead, you're hitting the frontal lobes of the brain. Guess what continues to happen? Well, if it's not affecting the base of the brain, which is where our autonomic nervous system is based, guess what the attacker would actually still be visualizing, Dave? Well, they would hear gurgling of blood. They would see chest rising and falling. So what do we do at this point? Well, we take our hands and we wrap it around this child's neck and we squeeze the life out of her. Now, they have evidence of this. Now, what does that evidence mean? Well, if they're saying that this is asphyxia, I don't necessarily know that means like a ligature. I'm always, when I have something that I'm taking a look at, when I'm thinking a sex attack, I'm always thinking bare hands. And so if you're placing your hands around her little neck, because as you said, she was only 5'2", right? Tiny 5'1". Thing. Yeah. 5'1", sorry. There you go. She's probably got indwelling hemorrhage in the strap muscles around her neck. She's probably got petechiae, which are the little pinprick hemorrhages that'll come up in the eyes. So she's struggling, to breathe after being violated like this. And that's, again, when you talk about how Mr. Dowdy was prevented from seeing, or the Louisiana State Police investigator was saying, look, you're not going to be able to see the rest of this because it's so horrific. That's what you're talking about here. I think that there's a high probability that there might even be some collapsing of the face in the frontal area, particularly superior to the bridge of the nose. And that this is just not something the normal person would want to bear witness to. And right the investigator is for not subjecting him to that. I can tell you who will be subjected to it. It's going to be 12 people sitting in a jury box. They're going to be able to see this, and it will be before the court because on the upside, and I think there is an upside here, we not only have 1, 2, 3, we've got 4 potential perpetrators here. In this case, Dave, we're talking about, and I hate this term, but we talked about, I hate what it implies. But it is the reality. We're talking about a gang rape scenario here, or at least you stood by and assisted in the facilitation of a sexual assault. All right. Whether or not you participated directly in it, you've got 4 individuals that have, in fact, now been charged after all of this work by an investigator with Louisiana State Police and a guy that's a radio host that broadcast this out, that started up this podcast. It's really something. It certainly is, I think, a commentary on the world that we're in now, where we can get this information out, which is something that we've seen the power of, haven't we, Dave?
Well, that's the thing. You and I were talking about this podcast, and the purpose of the podcast was the investigators had taken this as far as they could get it. They needed more information. And it was through this podcast, Stephan Ferguson, as the investigator with Louisiana State Police, going to Charles Dowdy and getting that kind of support from a professional broadcaster to actually do multiple episodes on Roxanne Sharp and to get the story out there specifically to people in the area and people who knew this area of Louisiana, to try to find the answers to this long ago rape murder of a young mother, a teen mother. And I think the part about this that really hit home for me is so many times we'll do a story, either with this or with other shows, and there will be a tip line. And it's almost a throwaway. But I'm telling you, you have no idea, gang, how many crimes are solved from an anonymous tip. Somebody who's been sitting on something they didn't think was important, but all these years later, it's like, hey, I remember this one thing. Maybe it'll help. And that's what happened. They had the investigation, Joe, from this podcast, got brand new information that they didn't know before. And that brand new information actually reignited the investigation to the point where, with this new information furthering the investigation, they being all the investigators, they were able to actually obtain aggravated rape and second-degree murder arrest warrants for 4 suspects in connection with the rape and murder of Roxanne Sharp. And I'm thinking kidnapping will be involved in that as well.
It probably will be, because you're taking, obviously, this girl against her will. And in addition to that, you couple that with modern technology, because, Dave, if you really want to put this on a even further, not that the tips and everything are not solid data, but now we're getting into the numbers game here. And what do I mean by that? Well, we're talking about the astronomical champion when it comes to astronomical numerical champion when it comes to forensic evidence, and we're talking about DNA. Right. So one of the things that was kind of put forward in this case was that, and this is said over and over again, even the press releases, where the Louisiana State Police said there was a lack of physical evidence. Well, with a lack of physical evidence, at the time, they couldn't tie anything back. And they also cited, and I found this interesting, because there was a delay. There was like a 3-day period. It was 3 days from the point that the attack took place and she was found. All right. They actually cite weather as part of this, that there had apparently been rainstorms during this period of time. And back then, and I've often said, even in our modern context, that the worst sound any investigator can hear at a crime scene that's outdoors is the rumbling of thunder off in the distance. And so, yeah, because it can be the death knell, for physical trace evidence, all those sorts of things. So this leads me to another salient point here. Maybe there was not physical evidence externally, okay, because her body has been, washed clean. But guess what? I think that some of this is going to be tied back to internal evidence, if you know what I mean, because this is a rape case. They would have done an extensive rape kit on her. Back then, yes, we did rape kits. There would have been swabs taken at her autopsy. There would have been hair pluckings done, hair combings. And if you really want to understand what a hair combing is, while we do that, is that if you've got a male attacker on a female attacker, I'm going to be very blunt with this. So the pubic regions of both individuals are coming in contact, right? And if you have pubic hair, after the perpetrator leaves, all right, we literally at autopsy, we suspect that they may have left something behind, and it's not, Dave, it's not just seminal deposition. We do pubic combings as well, all right? So because we lose pubic hair, and that actually translates into the pubic region of a victim. And so when we do these combings, we're not just combing to get the hair of the victim. If there are loose hairs that are attached, you think about the nature of pubic hair, how it's very tightly wound, and it can attach to specific areas. You leave hair behind. Well, many times that hair will come out. It won't just be a broken shaft. It could, in fact, be a shaft, or it can be a hair that actually has a root with it as well. So when we comb these, we put this and package that separately, okay? Because people hear us talking about nail scrapings and all this sort of, and we do that. You don't hear a lot about pubic combings, but that's something we do in addition to the rape kit with the swabbings that we do. Well, Dave, they have found something here, DNA-wise. Back then, CODIS did not exist. So if you were taking... There was no place to put a sample. First off, we didn't use DNA, and back all the way then, and now they do. Dave, correct me if I'm wrong. 2 of these subjects that they've hooked up on charges are already incarcerated. Right. Now they're saying that the reason they're incarcerated has nothing to do with this case. However, as we know, perpetrators develop a pattern. They have a tendency to continue to commit the same crimes. I'm wondering if one of these 2 subjects that's in custody already may very well have been involved in some kind of sexual event in their past. I guess we'll find out. And they're in CODIS.
You know what, Joe? When they serve the warrants on these guys, okay, they've got your 4 suspects. They've developed them, and they've got them. They've got 64-year-old Perry Wayne Taylor of Covington. They've got Daryl Spell of Covington, Carlos Cooper of Covington, and Billy Williams of Covington, all from Covington at the time. Billy Williams and Daryl Spell were not incarcerated at the time they served these warrants last week.
So we already know that 64-year-old Carlos Cooper and 64-year-old Perry Wayne Taylor are already doing time in Louisiana. Are they the source of the DNA? Are they in CODIS? I don't know. But on another point, Dave, I got to tell you, this is kind of amazing. The authorities actually coordinated the arrest of the other 2 subjects who were not incarcerated. Okay, here's how it kind of went down. On April the 21st of 2026, simultaneously in 2 different states, by the way, Billy Williams Jr. of Covington and Darrell Spell of Dayton, Ohio, were both simultaneously arrested as arrest warrants were executed on both of their domiciles. How cool is that? And this is how, kind of cued in, focused in on this whole process the police are. And look, to their credit, they're not saying a lot right now, but a lot is going to be said in a couple of weeks, because we know that there is going to be a hearing. We're going to learn a lot more. The clouds of time, if you will, are going to kind of be parted. And we're going to find out. We're going to find out what they have potentially in this case, because it is the most horrible thing that you can possibly imagine here in the real world that she suffered. And of course, we're talking about this precious young girl, Roxanne Sharp. She suffered. She suffered allegedly at the hands of potentially 4 perpetrators that finally they're being held to account. And this should be noted. Hollywood can create all of the fiction that they want to, but in my book, the real true detective is Stephan Ferguson. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
Owning a home is full of surprises. Some wonderful, some not so much. And when something breaks, it can feel like the whole day unravels. That's why HomeServe exists. For as little as $4.99 a month, you'll always have someone to call. A trusted professional ready to help, bringing peace of mind to 4.5 million homeowners nationwide. For plans starting at just $4.99 a month, go to homeserve.com. That's homeserve.com. Not available everywhere. Most plans range between $4.99 to $11.99 a month your first year. Terms apply on covered repairs.
We spend so much time of our lives switched on. Scrolling, multitasking, reacting. Miraval Resorts is an invitation to unplug and be present. For over 30 years, Miraval has been a global leader in mindfulness and well-being, helping people reconnect to what matters, body, mind, and spirit. Through meditation, yoga, time in nature, equine experiences, and moments designed for true presence, Miraval offers practical tools you can carry into everyday life. Miraval meets you where you are and supports wellness that actually lasts. Discover more by visiting MiravalResorts.com.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Lots of places can expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats to your identity, which is way more than anyone can do on their own. If we find anything suspicious, like new loans or changes to your financial accounts, we alert you right away, all through text, phone, email, or the LifeLock app. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/iHeart. Terms apply.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.